Welcome to this 90-minute webinar entitled Love-Led Practice in Children's Social Care. In it, you'll hear presenters with lived, learn and practice wisdom present a compelling argument for more love-led practice with children in care. We invite you to ask questions in the chat box as we go along, and there'll be time towards the end of the session, some questions to be answered by the panel of speakers. The topic might be emotive for you, and we do want to challenge traditional ways of working and to ask you to connect with your emotional selves in this work. However, we haven't set out to provoke unpleasant feelings. So I'm offering this trigger warning in case something difficult is stirred up for you. And I encourage you to take really good care of yourself if you feel disturbed by any of the content. Let me start by introducing the presenters. So I'm Margaret Davies, and I'm an independent social worker, supervisor and trainer with more than 20 years experience in working with children in care and the people who look after them, and almost 40 years experience of working from an attachment-based perspective. I've been the training lead at Children's Homes Quality, known as CHQ, and for the last 3 years, I've trained residential care leaders in an approach that we've called loving care. And we've seen surprisingly fast and highly positive results for the children, adults and organisations through using a loving care approach. Mary-Ann Hodd is a lived experience trainer, speaker and consultant. She combines her lived experience with her knowledge from a degree in psychology to support professionals and carers who look after children who've experienced adversity. She's also a change maker, the proud founder of the Guarantor Scheme, an initiative that supports care-experienced young people into housing in the private rented sector through corporate guarantors. She's helped to house over 400 young people so far and is working to get this implemented across more local authorities nationwide. Matt Langley is the service manager and responsible individual at Child First Children's Homes. Matt's passionate about a love-led approach in his homes, and he's instigated a significant change in his company's culture and practice. And Matt's organisation, Child First, asked CHQ if we could help them to embed the loving care approach throughout their home, and they took part in our evaluation of impact project. In May 2023, CHQ held a conference called Make Care Incredible, We Love Part of the Deal. And the day was attended by 140 leaders from the children's home sector, and it was an amazing day. Mary-Ann, Matt and I had the pleasure of working together in that conference, and we've continued to collaborate since then. We've seen and felt the difference that a love-led approach could make to children's care, and we want to speak to as many people about it as possible. So we're delighted that so many of you are here with us today. Let's start off with the voice of an expert by experience. I'm going to hand over now to Mary-Ann.
Fabulous. Thank you, Margaret. That's great. Hello, everyone. It's nice to be here with you all today. As Margaret's kindly introduced, my name is Mary-Ann, and I'm a lived experience trainer, advisor, and consultant. So I grew up in foster care and kind of talk a bit about that experience combined with some theories of psychology that really focused on supporting the adult to support young people in seeing beyond behaviours, in kind of having an aspirational approach to care. And so this topic of love is one that's really close to my heart, and is one that's really kind of prevalent as well in the conversations and what makes good outcomes for young people, I guess. So I'm going to be sharing with you today some snippets of my story and really thinking about some of the things that made the difference to me, some of the things I wish the adults had known, and some of that journey kind of through care and beyond. On the topic of love, I'll share that I'm stepping in at the moment from maternity leave. My baby boy was born 9 weeks ago now, which is bonkers. Where does time go? And on the subject of love, my gosh, my heart, it feels like it's going to explode daily. And I'm going to kind of share a bit about how I got here, I guess, because when I think about little me, if she could see me now, really, and I feel really proud to be able to kind of think about her. I'm actually going to share my screen just for a second with some pictures. And these pictures are of me, my little brother, and my mum there on the right. The left picture was taken when we were in foster care in a temporary placement over a Christmas period one year. And I've got my favourite glittery flared jeans on, 2000s fashion. And on the right here, kind of a picture with me, my younger brother, who's 2 years younger than me, and my mum. We lost my mum a couple of years ago now. And on the subject again of love, it's a really confusing, complex, messy, and sometimes really uncomfortable conversation. And something that comes up for me time and time again with my relationship with both my parents is this kind of feeling of love that you have for your parents, no matter what they've done to you, but also that awareness that I didn't get my needs met. Things happened to me that should have never have happened to me. And I also missed out on things that should have happened in my childhood. And so it's a really kind of confusing conversation to start to think about that little girl and what she needed and what she missed out on. And anything I talk to you about today is going to be with her in mind. I'm even kind of proud of the fact that I can sit here and look at these pictures and talk about her, because a couple of years ago I couldn't even do that. You know, I was kind of felt a bit embarrassed to think about this time and these pictures as such. My little brother, who's 2 years younger than me, on paper, we had the same upbringing with our parents for 9 years, in care for 9 years, his 11. And on very different outcomes. So I went on to study psychology and teaching and now do what I do with the training. Whereas my brother went on to experience homelessness and kind of got involved with drugs and a bad crowd and had a really difficult time leaving care. I'm really proud to say we're kind of 7 years down the line from that now. He's got his own little boy and he's absolutely thriving. He's doing really well. But this subject of love is a huge one when I think about what makes the difference and what made the difference for him. And he said to me before that, you know, that he just never really felt accepted for who he was. He always, this kind of label of the care experience really followed him, and he could never quite find his footing and who he was separate of that. So it's some of those elements that I'm going to be sharing with you in a little bit more detail, as I keep both of those little kids in mind today. So I'm going to stop sharing again. And just kind of my starting point always when thinking about the care experience is really kind of to consider the use of language and thinking about love in particular, this kind of word that has almost been feared. It's almost a scary word for people to talk about, because we associate it with kind of this romantic love. But there are so many types of love, so many ways to express love. And how we do that, I guess, is kind of one of the big questions that we're going to be exploring throughout our time together. But I think something that's really missing and really prevalent for young kids in care is the label of being care experienced, and thinking about how that influences on how we see ourselves in the world, what we think we're capable of, where we think we can go and who we can become, our self-esteem. You know, there's a question that I ask professionals, and I've asked hundreds of professionals over the last couple of years to give me the words that they associate with their young people, and what language do we hear surrounding kids in care. And I met with words like challenging behavior, naughty, poor outcomes, risk behaviors in the criminal justice system, or likely to end up there, neat, avoidant, you know, this it's a whole list of words that feel quite heavy, that feel quite negative and perpetuating of these stereotypes and stigma of what it means to be a kid in care. And that can really weigh on young people and how they feel that they fit in or don't fit in, or what our place is. You know, I was doing some work with a group of young people, and I had this 15-year-old lad tell me that he believed that he didn't realize that he would ever be able to go traveling because everyone around him had told him that his life was going to be harder than his peers. And he used the word peers because we adapt to this system speak of contact and everything that comes alongside that. And so he'd never let himself dream or think about the fact that he might be able to go traveling one day. And that kind of really, well, it's heartbreaking when you think about it, isn't it? Because it's this like idea that our care experience limits us to the point that it just defines where we're going to end up before we've had a chance to do that for ourselves. And so I think this conversation of love, of how we embed this into our practice, starts to really challenge some of those stereotypes, starts to really point out and build on what's good in our young people. How do we see that good? How do we build on those strengths? How do we support young people to see the good in themselves and really hone in onto what they might be able to do? It's that kind of idea, you know, that if the adults around us don't dare to dream for us, how can we do that for ourselves? And to do that, you need people in your life that have a genuine desire to see you do well, a genuine interest in you, this insight that maybe we can, you know. And I don't think that we necessarily get that ourselves, especially when you've experienced early trauma and adversity, right? And whether we like it or not, coming into care is traumatic, no matter how well that's been handled, being separated from your family. And the majority of young people do have this kind of high ACEs score, if we want to talk about that. I remember when I found mine out and I did my first ACEs quiz, I came out of a score of 7, and all of the associated outcomes that were surrounding that, I felt like I was doomed. I'm doomed for this adulthood that means that I'm going to get cancer. It means I'm going to die 20 years earlier than my peers. It means that I might not be in employment, educational training, and all of this kind of bombardment of these negative stereotypes, statistics that surround us. And I started to ask the question, okay, well, why might I be okay when everything around me tells me that I shouldn't be? Maybe why might I be? And thinking back again about my brother, why was I in a better position on that journey of leaving care than maybe he was? And I think the thing that comes back to this subject of love, of care, of acceptance, of belonging. You know, I can pinpoint people in my life, a different person at different stages in my life, but at least one person in my life at any given time that genuinely cared about me, that genuinely had an interest in me. It wasn't necessarily my foster parents, you know. I've kind of embedded a sense of worth of having to prove myself through their care, you know, from having the opposite of trauma-informed therapeutic experience of parenting, in that sense, where I kind of felt like I had to prove my worth through my academic achievements, and very much grew up a people pleaser through that. But when it wasn't coming through there, it was coming through a teacher that, you know, no matter how intense I'd been the day before, met me with a smile at the gates. It was the social worker that kind of told me, no, you can go to university, or you can be a teacher, you can do this stuff. That had this like genuine care, that their eyes lit up when I entered the room, that provided a space for me to be a child and have fun and play and laugh and all the things that I missed out on in those really early years. It's a massive, massive subject. And I think the theme of love goes way into all of those kind of that theory and that understanding of what we know children and young people need in order to heal from and overcome that experience of early adversity. You know, that there's a really great quote from Bruce Perry that says, the capacity to care, to share, to listen, value, and be empathetic, to be compassionate, comes from being cared for, shared with, listened to, valued, and nurtured. You know, how can we be something if we've never seen it? How can I show love and give love, not just to other people in relationships, but to myself if I've never experienced that? Isn't that like the fundamentals of what our young people, children and young people deserve, right? To have that feeling that they matter. That's all based in that concept of love. And that links, like, yeah, really nicely to that idea of belonging, right? To, I belong in this space, I'm accepted as I am. There's a really great TED talk actually from a lady called Sharice Nixon, and she talks about the ABCs and me of what young people need. And it's this idea that we need to be accepted as we are, as we show up. We need to have a sense of belonging. I belong in this space, I fit in this space, and a sense of control. And that kind of idea of control is so often taken away from us in care. You know, the adults decide what happens to us, where we live, what school we go to, what we can and can't do. And this kind of acceptance, belonging, control combines into this meaningful existence. And at the core of each of those is this concept of love, of how do we feel that? How do we learn to love ourselves, especially because in those kind of early years, in that environment of abuse, neglect, household dysfunction, whatever that is that love is likely missing. And sadly, the reality is then care is supposed to be that safe space that picks you up when things go wrong at home and make things better. What we know is that outcomes are far from where they could or should be. And what's missing maybe is this idea of like loving our young people for who they are. You know, that kind of learning about that journey of what that meant to me and what I had missed out on and what I deserved helped me have more compassion with myself, helped me have more compassion for me being the way that I was, for me kind of having this acceptance that my behaviors aren't don't make me mean that I'm bad. My list doesn't, my life doesn't have to be the list of bad things that happened in my life. Maybe I can be more, maybe I can do something good. And there's this another quote that I'll share with you in just a minute, which makes me think about all of those people in my life that I spoke about, you know, the teacher, the social worker, at a point it's been a supervisor, that have made the difference in my life, that probably have no idea the impact that they've made. And I look back on this journey now and I think, you know, it's those small moments of interaction, of that kind of like seeing this possibility of positive change in me that they saw in me before I could see that in myself. And they probably have no idea, half of them, the impact that they've made in my life. And I don't think I really had the impact, the understanding of that at the time. And I think that's a lot of kind of what we all do in the work that we do, and what you guys will be doing is planting those seeds. That quote that I was going to share is, you know, when the roots are deep, there is no need to fear the wind. And I just love that, because I think that's part of our duty, right? It's to plant those seeds, let the roots get deep, let us learn that we can love ourselves, that we can change, things can be different. You know, I spoke about having my baby boy, and that knowledge of the people in my life that have shown me that I can love myself, that I am worthy, I am lovable. From that little girl that you saw in those pictures who didn't believe that, I have learned and seen how much I can change and what good can be in my life. And I have the strongest desire that my little boy will never experience that pain and grief that I went through, and that he will be unconditionally loved throughout his life. And I think that's quite exciting, that I feel very fortunate to be able to say that, you know, that there's people probably like all of you guys sat here that made that impact for me. So I've kind of spoken quite thick and fast at you, but I hope some of those themes and some of those kind of concepts are going to stick with you. Some of those feelings will follow you in your practice. I think, you know, I'm going to end by saying one of my favorite quotes from Karen Treisman says, when the harm is relational, so too must be the healing. And I think that sums it up quite nicely what we're talking about today. So much of the harm that has happened to the young people that we support has been based in relationships, has been based in us not getting what we needed, or things happened to us that shouldn't have happened to us. And so it's up to us now to have those relationships that are going to help repair that. I'll start to sum up. So thank you for listening to me, and I'll look forward to listening to the rest of the speakers today. It's going to be a great show. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Mary-Ann. Brilliant to hear from you, always. And a couple of things that you said really struck me there. And when you said about we need to see the good in the children that we're working with in order for them to be able to start to see it in themselves. And I remember somebody else saying to me, it's like, I started once I got to really trust this person, got really close to this person, had a good relationship, I could start to see myself as they saw me. And it was really a big change for them, really different. And kind of connected to that is, like, if children don't believe they're lovable, if they're not seeing themselves through the eyes of somebody who loves them, how is that ever going to change? You know, they'll only believe that they're lovable if they can believe that somebody loves them. So
yeah,
that's a great challenge for us, isn't it?
yeah.
I can see lots of comments coming into the chat box for you, Mary-Ann, thanking you for your sharing. If anybody's got any questions, Mary-Ann will be part of our panel later on. So yeah, anything that you'd like to ask her, pop it in the chat box, and our VR producer will gather that in and help to select for us later on. Okay, I'm going to carry on talking now more about our Loving Care project, our efforts to actually make it real that children who live in residential children's homes, this project was focused on, that they can feel loved and they can see themselves through the eyes of the adults who are caring for them as lovable. So I'm just going to share my screen again. So my motivation, the thing that gets me up for work with a bounce, even though I've been a social worker for nearly 40 years, is to create the conditions where children and grown-up children can experience the secure love that they need to thrive, and especially for children in care. And for children in care, that means finding or creating, nurturing and protecting loving relationships for them. The relationships that they need in order to be able to feel safe enough to settle, to start to recover, and to grow into the children, the adults that they've got the potential to become. So we know, don't we, that human beings thrive best when we've got secure attachments to others. When John Bowlby was doing his research and thinking about the deeply fundamental human need to feel loved and connected to others for our survival, for our security, for our support to develop fully, he shared with his colleagues that he needed to analyse and talk about family love. But he didn't think that his scientific community would accept the word love as scientific enough. So he renamed the thing that he was describing as attachment. So in Bowlby's work and the development of his series that have followed over the years, attachment actually means love. And now, 50 odd years later, we're beginning to recover the importance of love for social work practice. So another quote from the wonderful Dr. Bruce Perry: the more healthy relationships a child has, the more likely she is to recover from trauma and thrive. Relationships are the agents of change, and the most powerful therapy is human love. Young people who live in the care system tell us, when we ask them, that they want to feel love, and that loving relationships protect them and keep them safe. And adults who've experienced care will often tell us that the one person that they felt loved them saved their lives, sometimes literally. If we really want to help the people that are in need of social care, children, their parents, vulnerable adults, we need to give them the relational conditions in which they can do their best. But there are many barriers to us loving children that we look after in care. The barriers arise out of our fears about further harm to children, or false allegations against adults, and our ideas about professionalism. So we know, don't we, that terrible abuse has happened in care historically and on to this day, and we need to safeguard children in our care. So we've created the rules to keep adults away from the kind of closeness that might allow perpetrator to have an opportunity. And we also know that children who've been abused can misread our signals, and this can lead to false allegations, which could destroy a career and be really stressful and terrible to live through. So we try to eliminate the potential for this to happen by keeping a distance and avoiding closeness with the children that we work with. Our ideas about objective professionalism are at odds with becoming emotionally involved with and having strong feelings about the children on our caseloads. And the processes and language that we use lead to a dehumanisation of the children that we work with, who become lack, PLA, care leavers, or NEET, for example. And the work with them that becomes making a placement, doing a statutory visit, independent living training, for example. And the relationships between us, which become key work sessions, direct work, planned ending, for example. And these are huge barriers to loving, meaningful relationships developing in that work. We also have an idea that love is for families and parents, and we aren't these children's parents. Decision-making about important transitions often takes place between people who aren't directly involved in a child's daily life. And these decisions can sometimes carelessly break up significant relationships in pursuit of other goals. And we might notice that young people resist closeness and respect their boundaries without, by the way, addressing their insecure attachment patterns. Or we might fear the further harm that might be caused to them if we do get close to them, and then our involvement has to end and they have to lose us. So there are many legitimate fears, and the ways to address these fears has been to create boundaries that prevent love being expressed. Not always love being felt, but a lot of people have feared that they couldn't express that love without putting their roles in jeopardy. But for the children the state looks after, children in care, we and their carers might be the only ones they have who might love them. What happens if we shy away from it? If we let our fears stop us? If they are left feeling that nobody loves them? What is that like? So in the words of Lisa Cherry in her book, The Brightness of Stars, the other social worker I remember was a woman called Eunice. She had a very cuddly appearance and drove a nice car, and I always felt that she liked me more than she was meant to. I remember that feeling a lot. It was a feeling that people wanted to help or like me, but that it wasn't allowed or appropriate or indeed relevant. But the reality is that I belonged to no one and was not the responsibility of another soul, really. When that initially penetrated through the core of my being, it was a realization that I carried like a sack of stones. That sensation of isolation, of otherness, and loss of sense of self ran so deep within me that I remember feeling like I couldn't breathe. Living with the feeling of not belonging anywhere to anyone was quite enough pain to bear. And Keith White, in his article, The Growth of Love, in the Scottish Journal of Residential Childcare, he says another unintended side effect of avoiding the word love in childcare is that it can leave a vacuum too easily filled by those who distort the whole notion of love and those who abuse the very ones we seek to safeguard, nurture, and love. Someone must use the word love responsibly and healthily in relation to children. So we need to be bold and innovative, but not foolish. We need to find new ways of working without throwing out the safeguards that we need. Our professionalism needs to become more expert at how to have safe, loving relationships that matter from within our roles. And the structures, really importantly, the policies, procedures, and guidelines which support us and keep us safe as workers need to further this goal. Scotland's government has outlined in detail what this could look like in their document called The Promise, and I'd really recommend everybody here Googles that and finds it and reads it. It's very illuminating. And now England's Care Review is also calling for stable homes built on love. So we need to find our ways forward. CHQ's Loving Care project has explored how to use love-led practice in children's homes to create an environment where love can flourish safely between children and the adults who take care of them. In the beginning, I saw loving care as being like the icing and the decoration on the cake. We need those layers of attachment and trauma-informed practice, sound safeguarding culture, and appropriate professionalism. But instead of starting by talking about those layers, we spoke about what draws people in and whets their appetite and makes them want to eat the cake, the icing and the decoration. We spoke about love. What I didn't know then was just how powerful it would be to give adults permission and encouragement to love the children that they care for, and what a game-changing ingredient love is. Language, it seems, actually does matter. It turns out that there's a huge difference between talking about attachment, relationship-based practice, trauma-informed care, and talking about love. Love is a deep and instinctive human feeling that leads to loving action. For some people, love is also a moral value and a principle that leads to action. Love is a powerful, positive motivator for most human beings, and especially many adults towards vulnerable children. And a love-led approach liberates this resource and maximizes its potential. This is what a manager of a children's home said to me recently. I've been in this home for 5 years and attachment theory has always been part of the training. However, in my opinion, how this is translated into practice has always been a missing link. Reframing attachment as love has shown that it isn't complicated. Love is something we all hopefully give and know how it feels to receive. This has seen a fundamental shift in understanding, and she meant in the understanding of the staff. So let me tell you about our pathfinding project. 3 organisations work with us to pathfind, to explore what loving care might look like on the ground. They created their own ways forward and changed their ways of working, the language that they use, their priorities, and the quality of the relationships that the adults built with the children. And we followed them, supported them, gave them advice when it's needed. And at the end of 6 to 8 months, we measured the impact of the changes. I'm only going to go through these in summary because Matt, who's going to speak next, is going to give you more information about what loving care looks like on the ground in his homes. But, you know, in summary, we found that trusting and affectionate relationships develop more quickly between the children and the adults who were looking after them. And with that, as you might expect, more positive outcomes for the children. So this is a quote from an Ofsted inspection report which graded the home outstanding in all areas. The child is making excellent and sustained progress in all areas of her development. She feels settled and her confidence has grown with the nurture and care that staff provide. Making excellent and sustained progress in all areas of her development. What was perhaps more surprising to us was the massive impact that a loving care approach had on the adults working in the homes. Another quote from an Ofsted inspection report: staff love working at the home and care deeply about the child. Staff are invested in the culture of the home as a nurturing space where children can reach their potential. And we've seen that managers can now confidently recruit new adults on the basis of personal qualities needed rather than qualifications or experience with children in care. And we also found that the staff turnover and sickness, the perennial bugbears of residential care, improved dramatically. And homes can grow their own leaders rather than having to compete for the few available registered managers in the sector. And we also looked at the impact on organisations. All three of our Pathfinder organisations were inspected by Ofsted independently, and they were all graded outstanding in all areas, even the newly registered homes, which is very rare. And they've maintained their outstanding grading to date. And we've seen greater confidence in the home's leaders and owners. They feel empowered to change their business model and their mission sometimes to benefit the young people they now feel more deeply connected to. So, for example, to avoid the cliff edge of turning 18, two of the organisations are investing in properties to provide supported accommodation for their young people. Through their love for their young people, they have been motivated to find creative ways to mend the so-called broken care system. They've confidently changed their processes, understanding better what the regulations and the guidance allows and supports them to do. So I'm now going to hand over to Matt so he can tell us more about what his organisation has done and achieved. Let's hear from him about what a love-led approach actually looks like in his children's homes. So over to you, Matt.
I am trying. Sorry, it's not letting me
There we go.
share my video right now.
Oh,
Hang on. I'm
there
here.
we are.
I'm here.
You see you now.
Hello. So, thank you, Margaret, for that bit. And I just wanted to obviously say, I think for me to sort of speak after both Marianne and Margaret, so inspirational and really powerful. Particularly, I think it's really important to share and see and hear from Marianne about her journey. But also the inspiration that Margaret's given, certainly myself and my organisation, and to be here now. So we're going to talk a little bit about loving care and how that's impacted our journey as an organisation. So I work for Child First. We are a children's home in West Sussex. We've been open for 20 years. We've grown in the last 2 years from 2 homes to 4. And we're planning on opening a 5th. So part of the reason that we're sort of doing that is we really feel like we've got something that works for us, works for the children, and we've really seen that. I think it's really important to highlight that lots of mistakes were made along the way. I think you only have to hear what Marianne has mentioned about like the impact of just what feel like little things around language and how that can impact your journey. So we've looked over the course of 4 years now with Margaret and looking at how we can impact change. So I've got a couple of topic points that we're going to go over today. I'm going to look at obviously a brief introduction, love languages, what we've learned, barriers as well. I think it's really important to understand that lots of people are still quite resistant to the ideas that we're trying to introduce. I use the word resistant. I think it's more about people trying to safeguard themselves along the way. I think it's a little bit about what we've been taught to protect ourselves. So if I could take anything from today, it's that I might be able to encourage people to drop the barrier a little bit and introduce some of the bits that we're going to share. So we're going to talk a little bit about what other people have said about us. We're going to include our own adults, our own children, and of course Ofsted. And then a little key takeaway at the end, the 4-word challenge. So I think, again, following on from what Marianne has mentioned about the language that we're using, I think there's so many words, acronyms, and we could spend a long time going over, we could use this, we could do that. I think it's really important to me that we try and focus on just 4 words. So if we can take them away today, and whatever role you have to play, if you could try to look to use that in all of the homes that you visit or the children that you're visiting, wherever you're visiting them, I think it's going to have a massive impact. So, brief introduction. So as I mentioned, I'm Matt. I am now service manager for Child First. I've worked all the way from support adult, as we would call it now, through to seniors as deputies manager. So as mentioned, 4 years ago, we introduced Loving Care. I attended a training session. We sat through that and they spoke really passionately about the impact of love. And at that point, love was a word that we were scared to use. We were encouraged not to use. And we protected ourselves from, we sort of did a bit of work along the way to try and better our practice, but we were still making lots of mistakes. I think one of the key messages I took through reflective supervision was how at one point I realised that I felt safer to hold a child than I did to hug them. So breaking that down, I felt more comfortable getting involved into physical restraint than I did just simply putting an arm around a child. I think for me, that was a really scary place to be. So what we want to look at doing is ensuring that the children feel safe within their own home. They're home with us, so they're home from home. And that they recognise that they're going to be loved unconditionally. I think we really have grown to be quite passionate that Loving Care has got the ability to transform these children's lives, and actually their journey through a children's home doesn't have to be something that they look back on negatively. I think me and my journey, as I mentioned, why Loving Care? So I'm going to sort of highlight the trigger warning earlier that Margaret mentioned. So as a support worker within Child First, I had a really strong relationship with a young lady, and she would used to refer to me as Dad, and we just had a really good connection. But I knew that throughout that relationship, I just felt uncomfortable, just because of the organisational culture. And there were times that she just needed a hug, and I would avoid that. And actually, she completely tore down our no hug policy because she just was like, no. Give us a hug. And in the end, it sort of made a mockery of it, which was brilliant. Now, unfortunately, a few years ago, sort of found out that she'd committed suicide, and that had a real impact on me because she had moved on from us, and we were discouraged from having sort of any contact with her, seeing her, all of those sorts of things. So when we had engaged in the training with CHQ and Loving Care, to me it was like, oh, I wish I'd known this a few years before, because it would have been so important, so powerful, and actually we could have reached out, could have maintained those bonds. So I'm going to talk a little bit as we go on through about how we can do that. So again, I'm sort of looking at through these on the slide, and we're going to go again to the things that Marianne's mentioning, being on the other side of that, having experienced that. I think it's really important that the children understand what healthy, loving relationship. I think we really want to create secure bonds. I think when we look at all of these children's histories, a large percentage of them really struggle for positive male and female adult role models. And that's what we're looking to try and create. I think it's about that unconditional positive regard, isn't it? I think, ultimately sometimes things are go wrong for them, but we're going to still be there. We're going to judge them for that. We're going to be there to support them. And right at the end, we're talking about strong bonds that last beyond the home. So again, later throughout the slide, we're going to talk about what you guys can do, certainly those that are coming from a children's homes background, what you can do to safely support the children even once they've moved on. So in our homes, we really do promote having those loving relationships with the children. So I recognise that it needs to be something that develops naturally and organically. So it isn't about a child that then moves in with us, running up, throwing your arms around and saying, I love you. That would be the message misunderstood. So allowing that to grow organically, but we're encouraging our adults to feel safe to say, you know what, you did well today. That may well be, I love you, you've done great. I'm proud of you. You can look at the words you use and the language that we're using and how important that is. So the 5 love languages, I'm sure lots of us are really familiar with this. I think we really look at how we can use these. So I want to sort of break each part down. So physical touch. So I work with various adults, and some of them, I think as people, you get some people that physical touch that works for you. Some people are huggers, some are not. And when we're talking to our adults about implementing loving care, particularly new ones, some of them you can see the fear in their eyes when you're talking about physical touch because that's not for them. And that's fine. And I sort of look at, okay, how can we implement 2 or 3 of these for you in your relationships with the children? But equally, how can we dissect them down, break them down? So physical touch as well. Some of the children just aren't going to respond to it. There's been plenty of times that I think if I were to hug one of the children that I've supported, probably get something thrown at me. But you can look at different ways. So, an arm on the shoulder as you're walking side by side down the street. Just that, I'm there for you. I'm holding you in mind. I think that's really powerful. And some children might need head stroke. You might be able to sit and paint their nails. There are different ways to create that bond. It isn't just about running up to every child and giving them a big hug. Some may well appreciate that. In terms of acts of service, for me, I think this is really important. I've seen it. I've done it myself. I think we work with children, and we're so focused on trying to develop them and ready them for leaving. So we get very stuck on promoting their independence. And I've seen so many times that it's absolutely hammering it down the rain outside, and this child might need a lift to college, or they're meant to get the bus to college, and you sit and see adults go, no, you're on independence, you're meant to cook your own dinner, you're meant to get your own bus, you're meant to do this, get on with it. And to me, it was just sour taste. So I always encourage adults, yes, we do want to encourage these things where we can, promote some independence, but let's not do it where that child is actually then feeling a bit tossed to the street. So I always encourage people, actually that active service, go, do you know what? I can see it's raining today. I can see you're late. I can see that, maybe it's not been a great day today. I'll give you a lift to your college. So be prepared to sort of break these little things that we put in place. Yes. For me, again, we've really encouraged people to do this, to feel comfortable buying the children gifts. Again, we protect ourselves so much that as adults, if you buy the child a gift, you're thinking everyone's going to think I'm grooming them. Well, I've got to buy everyone a gift. I've got to do, and I think it's about transparency. So we'll often have adults that on their weekend off, they may be out in the shops, they may see Harry Potter mug or a Marvel comic, and we will encourage them to, if you see something, buy it. Be transparent, and that's the real key message for these things. Be transparent. Yes, you can put your receipt in and get that back, but actually the image that creates for the child is really important, because they know that when you're not at that home, It isn't just a job to you. You've seen that in the shop, you've picked it up, you brought it in. And you know what? The next time it might be something else for another child. It might be one of the other adults. And I think that's something we should look to encourage, again, as long as we're working alongside transparency. So there is an element here that we still need to maintain that sort of safeguarding ourselves, protecting ourselves, but talking amongst your team, to your managers, colleagues, really, really important. Quality time as well. I've found actually a lot of the people that struggle with the physical touch aspects, in terms of actually being able to spend that quality time with children, that's where they really, really flourish. They tend to be the people that are like really busy, they want to cook, they want to go out for drives, they do things like that. The best conversations I've ever had with children, as I'm sure we can all agree, you're one-to-one, you're driving, you're both facing forward, you've got your music on, and there is not that awkward eye contact. I think it's really, really important. And then lastly, words of affirmation. So again, going back to I love you, it isn't always about that. You know, great if we can sit there and say, do you know what? Great, talking on the phone. Oh yeah, have a nice evening. Love you, bye. Great. I think being able to sit there and say to a child, I'm really proud of you, is so important. I don't think people realise the value of that. And again, this is something that I picked up on. I was working with a young girl and she'd managed to go to school for the full day, which was a massive, massive achievement for her. And later on in that evening, we were having a conversation. It's due to finish at 11 o'clock at night. And I just said to her, you know, really, really proud of you for getting to school today. That's amazing. For me, it just didn't register. The next day, you're coming in, you know, you find out that this young girl then is in floods of tears to the others and kept them up for another hour past bedtime. But she was so happy because someone had said to her that they were proud of her, and that was something that she hadn't experienced before. And then that really made me realise the power of our words. So yeah, we know this. I think it's really obvious that lots of people feel uncomfortable about love-led practice. You know, we had someone quite high up that we worked with within West Sussex, and we sort of spoke to them about our ethos and how we were trying to introduce this. And you know, we were met with, we can't love them. Their time with you is conditioned. And I sort of thought that's frustrating. I understood sort of the comments, but actually 2 years later, he was able to come out and look at the homes, and he actually said there and then, "I'm really sorry for what I said because I just didn't get it. I didn't think you'd be able to achieve what you've achieved." And for me, I thought, great, that was a job done. I think we've been drilled to safeguard ourselves, and as professionals, we sacrifice a lot of the children's feelings around that, and we just don't realise that we're doing it. We know that because of the concerns around children living in children's homes, that they're missing out on the human right to be loved. So I think that goes back to how often do you see in children's homes that there aren't hugs and those nice words shared. And I completely understand that every child is different, and actually for some children it wouldn't be appropriate and it may be misinterpreted. But I think again, it's about understanding your children, what's going to work for them, what are their love languages. And we know that rather than reduce the love, it's essential to reduce the risk. So for me, again, transparency, it is really, really important that when we're talking about these gifts and the acts of service, because at times, you know, when you're giving them that lift to the station because they're late, despite the fact they're meant to be on their independence, we know full well that some other members within your team are probably going to be going, well, you're not really sticking to the rules. So again, about being really transparent and honest about why we're doing these things. And we know that we have to continuously develop our practice. For me, we've made mistakes. We've probably pushed things too far at times. All again, transparent and honest. But we've been able to look back on it and reflect on it and go, okay, well, maybe we need to bring that back in again, protect ourselves a little bit more. One thing that was really powerful for me is I'm a big advocate for the language that we use. Now, I'm not care experienced through that. I'm practice experienced. When we were having conversations a few weeks ago with Scott, who was meant to be with us, it was interesting because I was talking about how powerful to me it was that we used the term home instead of placement. And he sort of posed devil's advocate question to me and said, well, what about those children that don't want it to be home? Those children that are wanting to go home, which of course is common. And I think I took that away and I said, okay, I think that's a really, really useful point. So we can then look at, do we develop that? Is it a home from home? Does the child feel comfortable with it? And I think it's about understanding your home and your children and understanding where they're at in that journey and what's going to be important for them and what the impact is for them. So the things that we've changed and some things that I found really important is reflective diaries. Now, these aren't always met with a great deal of positivity from our adults, but for me, they've been massive. I think they've been a really useful supervision tool as well. So all of the adults in our homes will have a diary decorated their own way, very blank, and we'll look at them just taking away from each day to spend 5 minutes and reflecting on their day. You know, what were the missed opportunities? What would I have done different as a parent? And I think that's been really, really powerful for us to take into a supervision and then look back and go, well, actually, yeah, it's really useful that you've seen that, you've identified that. And, you know, some examples, simply a child off the back of a difficult period has been crying in the corner and that adult just didn't feel comfortable going and giving them a hug in that moment, but they were able to reflect back on that and go, I missed that. That was a real missed opportunity for me. And it's been a really, really powerful tool for supervision as well. You know, you can end up with sort of 15, 20 entries across a month where the adults are giving to you things that they've reflected on where they could improve. And it's been beneficial for us, certainly as an organisation, and a really, really easy tool. In the language, so I've been a massive, massive advocate for the language. So this had actually we've done the sessions with Mary-Ann previously about language and Let's Talk Words. I think it's so important that we try to drive out words like staff, residential unit, and contact. And we're going to talk a little bit more later on about it. But for me, I don't understand why the words staff and contact certainly are used. I challenge social workers regularly when they come into our home and use the term residential unit, especially when I've sat there and seen them talk to someone that's been living with us for 3 years. I think contact, again, when you're talking to children and they're saying, I'm going to have contact with my dad, that really struck me and I just found it just did not sit right with me. So again, when we go back to like the 4-word challenge at the end, things like contact and residential unit and staff, when you're entering those homes, depending on your role, please do think about the language that you're using because it can be so powerful. And the removal of offices. For me, an office has always served as a bit of a safe space for adults. And I think we need to be creating safe spaces for children, not for adults. I've seen many, many adults who will gravitate towards to an office behind a locked door. I've then seen the door hammered at, kicked, whatever. And I think we need to be doing away with that. You know, we don't need big notice boards up. We don't need institutional signs. And for me, it's just a negative space. What we've actually found really positive to do with our office spaces is create a sofa bed space, study space, and we'll get to when children can actually come back and use that sofa bed to stay. Yeah, so as I've mentioned before, we've looked to really create a family home, and that means removing all the signs and notice boards and educational leaflets. The removal of signs is something that we continuously face a battle with, particularly with our fire risk assessments. You will get some fire risk assessors that will come out and they will say, look, as long as you've got a good, robust risk assessment in place and your children are well drilled, you know, they've lived here for a long time, they know the front and the back door to get out, And some are really supportive of it. And it can be sometimes demoralising when that fire risk assessor changes and someone else then will come out. Obviously, we are bound by that. Solid risk assessment will really support that. In institutionalised notice board and educational leaflets, again, for me, I remember just walking around and I would look at this notice board that we used to have, and there would be leaflets about substance misuse, missing from home forms, and I just thought, actually, the power of our conversation is going to provide them that information. I don't think anyone ever really utilises that space. So can we remove that? Can we make this space a lot nicer? And another one, it was interesting because even up to a few weeks ago, so I'm new to my role as a service manager, and a question was posed. I was in an RI forum about the requirements around the visitors book, and everyone sort of going, yeah, you have to have one. I think again, it's about being brave enough to interpret regulations, and so you're required to record visitors. So we have a really robust online system. So if someone comes into our building, we can upload that onto a system, on our laptop. It doesn't need to be a visitor's book under someone's nose to record them in and out. Just that handing over that book. You've got a visitor coming in, or family coming into the home, and that child stood next to you while you're handing potentially their parents, sisters, and whatever this book. It's just that, again, it's that reminding them of where they are. And again, so children being able to have friends over, so sleepovers, family time, tea, coffee, all of that. Really, really important that we're able to create those spaces. So the removal of the office space has really supported us with sleepovers for the children. Again, promoting that. The children, the risks, what is appropriate at that time and not. We've been really supportive of children sticking a mattress down in the lounge, and adults have been really happy to sort of sleep on a sofa and watch and do those things. Again, it's about having robust risk assessments in place that understand the risks that we're reducing. And key workers. So many times I will look at children come in to move in with us, and the first thing that gets banded about is who's their key worker, who's going to be that one person. And I always really, really struggled with that. And I spent a long time looking through various regulations in the children's homes regs about key workers, and it's not there. It's something that has existed over decades, I think, and again, a bit of a safety crutch. There's no reason for it. We sit there and we determine who is going to have a relationship with this child pretty much before they've moved in, and actually we don't really tend to see that the real child until a few months have gone by. So assuming who their key worker will be, to me, always felt really unnatural. And I know a lot of people will sit and think, well, who's going to do all the work for them? We always share that load, so we will have a calendar, and we can upload when their dentist appointment is, all of those appointments, and we just communicate on that day and share out those responsibilities, and it promotes positive relationships with all of the adults in the home. And I think it lessens the impact when their key adult or key worker isn't around that day. So what we have done, and I noticed one of the questions around when we sort of pushed it too far. So staying close and how important that is to us. So we've had some children that have moved on. What we probably got wrong was allowing them to settle into whatever they were doing. Where they then moved into. They were still quite heavily reliant on us, even having moved on. And I think there is that element of, well, that's okay. We still want to be that support network, and we were, but we probably allowed child to be too heavily reliant on us still. So I just saw that question earlier, and I wanted to sort of address where we potentially not really considered it. But staying close, we want to create and maintain lifelong connections. So I go back to the story at the beginning. I would have loved to have been able to communicate with that child once they'd moved on. And that was never supported, and found that really, really difficult. So what we want to be able to do is keep in touch by visiting them. Again, transparency, communicating with people about your plans to do that. It's really important. That's the part I think where we safeguard ourselves. So inviting them around, again, the risks of this child. They have lived with you for X amount of time. There are some children that it's probably not going to be appropriate to invite them back for whatever reason. But for those that are, please do feel confident and comfortable enough to do that, because it's such a lovely experience when you've got some of these children that have been with you for a few years and they're able to come back and enjoy that time around you, because those bonds are real. They do like being around you, and a lot of your adults will like being around them. I think it's in terms of inviting them around and things like that, it's really important for me about promoting sleepovers. I had someone, when I mentioned this before, they asked about, well, where do they stay? We don't all have spare rooms. And I sort of posed the question and said, well, why can't they stay on a blow-up mattress in the lounge? What? It's not permanent accommodation. It's for a one night only thing. Your child would probably go on a sleepover and stay around their friend's lounge. It's about, again, knowing the risks, having a robust plan in place. If we know we've got someone that's going to run away a lot, actually probably letting them have a sleepover in the lounge might not be the best move. So there absolutely are examples when some of the things that I'm sort of suggesting to you all aren't going to work. And we'll always look to, again, a central calendar. So we'll make sure that we're sending off birthday cards, Christmas cards. Sometimes these children don't want to hear from us. That again has been something we've experienced. And I think you know your relationships with those children. The adults that those children are going to want to spend time with as well when they move on. I've certainly been one of these people that one or two of the children haven't wanted to speak to when they've moved on, and that's fine. I don't take that too personally, but you rely on your strength and your relationships with other people as well. And yeah, so we're looking at writing letters and catching up, checking in, and more so phone calls and stuff. But I think it's really important that they know that they can call. We will ensure that they have and keep the contact details for when they move on. And we have had many of them ring up again. And we're still trying to find that balance again. I go back to getting it right about what amount of support for them is right. But for me, I think it's just natural that I want to know. I have that inquisitive thing with the children that I've spent time with. I want to know how they're doing, and I want to have a way that they can get in contact with me. And I think it's really important to open that up to them. So along the way, we've faced lots of barriers, as I mentioned earlier, some high up people across West Sussex, and we'd spoken to them and they were able to reflect on that. And I think that was really powerful for me. I think lots of people will misunderstand the term love. I think it is a word that when you look at it in a relationship with the children from a professional aspect, I think the word gets sexualized and we automatically put a wall up to protect ourselves because we are scared. We're scared of the scrutiny that we're going to face. We're scared of how people are going to interpret our relationships with those children. And I think we need to look to managing risks better. So the children, I've worked with supported a child that has been with us now for 4 or 5 years. And she came to us when we were using the institutionalized language. And to me, it was really funny because at the time when we were talking with her, sort of saying, I don't really like the word adults and, don't like the word carers and staff. And she was like, well, you are my carer. I'm just going to call you carers. And actually, she'd wrote an amazing blog about how important that has been, the big change of languages. And I think 2 of the comments coming up are actually her reflections on her time with us. She's really happy for that blog to be shared, and I'd love to do that if we have people's contact details. For me, I think the children who come to us now, we don't talk to them about loving care. they have no understanding of that term, because that's not natural to me. I want it to be something that they don't know any different. And I think it's really important that, lots of the children will come to us. And one of the terms I'm really challenging at the moment is when I hear that children are being stepped down into a foster home. And I find that in some respects quite offensive, because I think, actually, who's it a step down for? In what circumstance is it a step down? And I think, we need to consider that, actually, this can be their family home as well. And a lot of the comments from the children will reflect that. They're really passionate about their relationships and their homes here. So obviously the last paragraph mentions girl who I was speaking about before. And I think we were able to really relax and talk to them in just a much more respectful and understanding way. And we were able to share experiences with the children. And I think a lot of the time you have lots of adults that are having conversations with these children, who these adults have done these things, before. They've stolen a pack of sweets from the shop growing up, and they've done X, Y, Z. Naturally, there's this big fear factor about talking openly and honestly with the children about that. And think, sometimes we can let some guards down, and it is. I have just mentioned, sorry, just in as well about retention. So we have an incredible retention rate among our adults here. We don't really get people that leave. There's the obvious times where someone wants a bit of progression, and it's there to offer and whatever, but we don't get people in our homes that are particularly unhappy. A lot of them will say that it just doesn't feel like work. They're very comfortable in our homes, and that's something that we really, really want to promote. We don't have adults walking around wearing shoes. If you walk into your own home, you take your shoes off. It's people have slippers. They're able to chill out. I promote my adults to sit on the sofa and watch a film with the kids. There's no like standing over people and saying, "Come on, you've got to be getting every inch of dust off the worktops," and stuff like that. For me, it's not contributing to a homely environment. And there are some of them that struggle, because I'm saying to them, sit down, embrace it, really enjoy it. And I think it's really, for me, really powerful to read. Certainly the blue comment, that you're looking at someone that's been with us for quite a while, and they can see the difference, and they have a relationship. So we have 4 children's homes now, up to 20 children. We'll regularly have parties where all of those children are together. 5 years ago, we would never have done that, because we would have thought, well, what about when this child links in with this child, and what's that risk there? But they all get along. They all spend these time together. We have massive, massive parties, and it really works. And it really lends to a community feel. What Ofsted say? This is an interesting one for me, because in some respects I regret referencing it. However, I noticed in the guest list that our old Ofsted inspector, is here. And one of the things that I remember saying to him was, I don't actually so much scare what you're going to come and say, because I believe in what we're doing. And I found that a really powerful space to be in. They have come out and they have really, really recognised that the relationships that we've got with the children so powerful and strong, and that love is a central focus of our home. And I think if you can get to that space where you're not worried about what people are going to come in and say. We're not worrying about that scrutiny, because and you believe that it's right. And I think for me, it's lovely to read the comments that we're getting, and there's no coincidence for me that the gradings we're receiving are amazing. We are getting consistent outstandings across our homes. Prior to having introduced loving care into our homes, we hadn't achieved an outstanding for 20 years. And straight off the bat of that, we're consistently achieving outstanding gradings across our homes, and we're keeping them. So to finish the 4-word change challenge, so I think it speaks for itself. I think it's really powerful to look at these 4 words, because I think if you look at them versus the words next to them, and again, we're open to interpretation. I saw again someone mentioning about adult and how it wasn't being effective. So just use your name. Why do we there doesn't need to be a title, really. See, you will find whatever fits your home at the time. But things like placement, resident, contact, staff, for me, just absolutely need to go. They don't need to be used in any shape or form. And there is nothing in place that says you need to use these words. So all you need to do is a little bit of work to change a bit of your paperwork, take those words out, and encourage people to change their language when they're visiting your home. So social workers and things like that, I completely respect that they will be visiting many, many other homes, and they will use that language, and that is their safety net, and they will fall back into using that. So just a very simple, polite, when they get it, let's say wrong, when they use those terms, just gently challenge them and nudge them. We have a letter that we'll send out to all the professionals involved with that child when they move in with us. They'll be told about our ethos and our language. And we'll remind them we're confident about what we're doing and why, and that's we feel safe to do that. And I hope some of that was beneficial. Sorry for rambling on.
Thank you, Matt. That was absolutely brilliant. Not a ramble at all. Thank you so much. We're coming up to time for questions, but I just wanted to pick up on a couple of things that you said. And I really liked the way that you were making it clear that this is a job of continuously kind of growing and learning about what we're doing and how to do this. And you're flexing what you do in relation to the children that you have and the relationships that develop between the adults and the children that you've got at any one time, which is how real relationships are, isn't it? It's that's how real relationships are, and it's translating that into a workplace, a workspace, and approaching that professionally, but with that kind of reality, the realness, the real stuff of relationships and their adaptations and the different ways of kind of connecting that will naturally bring. So onwards and upwards always. And also we're kind of finding out this is new practice in children's homes. There isn't a kind of template for it. So you're finding out as you go along, and it's really great that we're learning from the things that go well and the things that didn't go so well, and how to kind of avoid that really next time, maybe.
It's really important to acknowledge that we make mistakes as adults that are caring for the children. Much like parents make mistakes with their children, even the best, and I think it's really important sometimes to hold your hands up, especially with the children, and sometimes go, do you know what, I've got that wrong, or I missed that opportunity there, and just label that.
Yeah. And that's our mistake as adults, rather than they didn't respond in the way that we wanted them to, or whatever. Yeah, okay, there's loads of things we could talk about all day long, but we've only got 90 minutes, and we really want to have some time for people's questions now. So our wonderful supporter Fee has been monitoring the chat box and trying to gather some questions that are kind of common themes. So can we spotlight Mary Ann again? And Fee, could you perhaps mention some of the questions a question that's come in, and we'll do our best.
Absolutely. I think we should well, I want to start because actually Matt's been talking so brilliantly about how it's working in practice. There's been a question that's asking about pets or animals in your homes, and obviously many family homes would have animals, so I wonder if you've got any thoughts on whether you do have them, but whether you might consider that.
We have so we've got 4 homes. 3 of them have about 4 or 5 chickens each. We've got a pond with various fish. We've got Philip the tortoise, dogs that will come in. Again, it's risk assessing. It's the pond. Obviously, we have a little bit of a fence around it, and we manage that risk. For me, it was really important to try and keep that on there because it was in our new home, so it was already there. And I thought, what beautiful place to be able to sit and just relax, particularly if you're in a period where you're feeling a bit crap. If you can go just sit in the garden, it's such a nice, peaceful zone. You know, the children absolutely, well, some of the children hate the chickens, some love the chickens. You know, some of them get in there where they'll collect the eggs every morning, they'll clean the chickens out. It's what works for them. But yeah, we have lots of pets, probably too many sometimes. You know, we had a poor rabbit with a broken foot that ended up costing about £3,000, but the children did love the rabbit.
Oh, amazing. Thanks, Matt. Another question I think we should address, if we go back to when Margaret was speaking, you shared a comment around children sometimes misunderstanding signals and how that can lead to false allegations. And there was a really, interesting question around where that's come from. Is there evidence or what the background is to that?
Yeah. And I'm mindful with this question that I don't want to be misinterpreted. I'm not saying children lie when they make allegations against staff. And obviously we really need to believe children and take their allegations seriously and, really, look into any allegation that might be raised. And we know from attachment theory research and from research around trauma and the impact of trauma on people going forward in their lives that we can be left with like an internal working model which is fearful and expecting danger, and our nervous systems and our kind of biological, neurological, interpersonal systems can be triggered into thinking that something that's happened before is happening again now when we receive signals that are similar, and that system can be kind of easily triggered into thinking that danger and bad things are happening. That's like within the trauma research and attachment theory research around internal working models and so on. And certainly when I worked for many years in fostering services, and that was always kind of routinely given out as advice to social workers and to foster carers, people looking after children, that, your signals, which you intend to be kind and loving, etc., or helpful, might be misinterpreted by a child. So be careful, stay away, keep the distance, so you don't actually trigger any of that off. So that's the kind of research background to that comment, and it's a really interesting area with this whole thing of loving care. A big fear for people is around allegations being made against them if they get too close. But what we've done, as Scott said at one of our conferences, we've safeguarded the love out of children's care, and that the impact of that is, it has to be accounted for as well, and has to be taken on board. Hope that answers that. Another question, Fee?
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Margaret. I didn't know if Mary-Ann was going to jump in, but she's waiting patiently. We'll have another question, shall we? So we've had lots of things coming in, a couple of sort of practical things. You talked, Matt, about how you work across the team rather than having necessarily key workers, that you share the load. And then somebody asked a question around is there a system, an online system that's allowing you to do that is allowing the love-led and reflective practice that you talked so brilliantly about, to kind of keep track of that. And maybe somebody in the chat can share this. Somebody listening might have a brilliant system they use, but what are you using to help that?
I don't know if I'm allowed to promote online recording systems, but I'm going to go for it now. So we've used ClearCare, and to be honest, we have used our own templates, our own forms. We changed lots of the language. So things like the risk assessment, obviously I use that term quite a lot. We use the term like keeping me safe, and then it will be following on whatever the risk is, keeping me safe from self-harm or e-safety, stuff like that. So a lot of our documents and stuff, we've changed a lot of the language. I could send a very exhaustive list of all the things that we changed, but it's really lended to us evidencing our relationships and what's important to us in line with our ethos. In terms of the key worker role, we just did away with it. really quickly. We were just like, to us, it's not important. Obviously there was a period of time that the children that were still with us knew who their key workers were. But it's just not required. It's just not there. And I've honestly never had a problem. Whenever I spoke to other homes, their biggest fear has always been, "Oh, we're going to miss this appointment." And what happens? And it's like, we have an Outlook calendar on your laptop and things like that. Pop it on there. And as long as you guys communicate effectively, which they do, it's there. I've actually found that more stuff got missed when we had key workers and more paperwork wasn't updated when it should have been and whatever. And actually, the only thing we do now is someone that has a really strong relationship with that child will write their me and my world report or whatever you guys want to call it.
Yeah. Can I just jump in there as well? Because I'm fascinated by this. Key working came in lots of settings as a way of trying to ensure that the child or the patient or, whoever it was in whichever setting would have a special relationship with one person, because we know from attachment theory that we need to have that kind of depth of relationship. And in an institutional setting or in a group setting, that could get lost. So everybody had to have their key worker. So it was like invented as a way to try and ensure that people had proper relationships. But then it's become a task-driven thing. It's like that's the person who does X, Y, and Z. And actually what's happening in Matt's homes is they don't need that key worker for relationships, because the relationships are being formed because it's important, and it's like being driven by this vision of love-led practice. So I think it's really interesting that you don't need to have key workers anymore. That's like because the children are getting loved and loving relationships without them. Yeah. Anything else? 15:28. Marianne, have you got anything you want to say? I'm just aware of time now.
I think a lot of it's been covered, to be honest. I think, that some of this feels obvious, some of it's awkward. We're kind of like, it's some of it you're already doing and it's just kind of embedding it into practice. But it's really nice to read all the positive feedback that's coming in. I guess I would like to end with kind of a reminder or a note that, the CHQ deliver training in this area. So if you want to continue the conversation beyond today, please do reach out to CHQ. And I also deliver keynotes kind of on a similar note. So, feel free to reach out to us, keep the conversation going. It's meaningful stuff, isn't it? And it's great to see some of those kind of comments coming in the chat box there. Yeah.
Oh. Thanks, Marianne. I am going to share our contact details again so that everybody has them who wants them. I'm going to wrap up because it's 2 minutes to our ending time. So thanks everybody for the questions. I'm sorry we didn't get around to answering very many of them. But maybe we'll do something with that. We'll save all the questions and maybe we'll start having a blog, or we'll, put something out there that addresses them. So as part of my wrapping up, I just want to say that if you think that this is just good practice, it's what you're already doing, then great. If you're already working in this way, amazing, thank you. I'm so glad that you do, but we aren't there yet as a sector. All of our homes met with resistance, and Matt's identified some of the things. So for example, we know that one home was severely criticised because adults shed a tear when they were leaving a boy in a placement that he really didn't want to go to, a new home that he really didn't want to go to. We know that a male member of staff hugging a child in the playground at the end of the school day when she came out of school and he was picking her up, he was reported as a safeguarding concern by the school. And we know that care planning decisions are sometimes based on finances rather than the need to preserve real attachments that have developed. So let's be clear about what's needed. And I'm going to borrow from Scotland's promise. Secure attachments based on loving, consistent relationships must be the bedrock of every decision made about children. So can you make your number one top priority to find or create, nurture and protect loving relationships for the people that you work with? So we hope that you can. And if you want to stay in contact with us after today to for us to support you on that journey, or to share your information about that journey and how it's going along, or to have any of us speak to you, then these are our details. Please take a photo of the screen or something if you think you might want them. We'll probably send a follow-up email with those details in again. And also, we'd love you to give us some feedback on the event through a feedback form, very quick to fill in. So you could scan the QR code here with your phone and get that Microsoft form opened up on your device, or I think Fee's put the link into the chat box, so you could click on the link in the chat box. So thanks very much, everybody, for coming. It's been a really great afternoon with you, and I hope that you will enjoy the rest of Social Work Week. Maybe share information about this event on social media using the hashtags. And yeah, great to see you all. Or thank you for being here.